Hi everybody, this video is going to be about atomic absorption, emission, line spectra, and using these ideas to help figure out the chemical composition of stars. We can also use it to figure out the age of a star. I do just want to preface this lesson by saying I am not an astronomer or an astrophysicist. While this is very interesting stuff, if you ask me questions along the lines of the actual astronomy part, I'm probably not going to know the answer. We're just trying to use this as a real life example of a chemistry topic we're trying to teach you, which is atomic absorption and emission. So just some really brief overview of looking at where the elements came from. You know, we're spending an entire chemistry class using elements and making molecules from these elements. And I do think it's nice to take a moment and just look at one of the main theories about where these elements came from. And that's from the Big Bang theory. So when time began over here on the left side, okay, we have a Big Bang, right? All of a sudden, the whole universe goes through a super fast inflation. Things are very, very, very hot, okay? We have electrons, quarks, some other weird particles. After, if you look up here, I mean, look at how fast this happens. All of a sudden, it starts cooling down. And when it cools down, it shrinks back together. And the quarks start to clump together. And when they start coming together, they start making protons and neutrons. That all happens within 1 second of the Big Bang. We go from nothing to all of a sudden we have these little particles that are small. Okay, they cool down enough that they can come close enough together to make protons and neutrons. But it's still so hot that things are moving so fast that they can't combine to form atoms yet. There's no light that's traveling around. It's basically described as a super hot fog. Eventually, after a lot longer, the electrons start to combine with the protons and the neutrons, and that's when we get our first atoms. We finally, after all that time, get hydrogen and helium. And it's now cool enough and things are going slow enough, we can finally have light shining through. Then, if you look up here, we're now at 1 billion years afterwards. Okay, this is not to scale. Be careful about that. Gravity kind of kicks in, and then the hydrogen and helium start to condense. They start forming clouds of the galaxies and the stars. Then the galaxies start clumping together. The stars start dying, and when they die, they implode, and then they explode, and they send out heavier elements into space. Those start to clump together to make new stars, new planets, and it kind of is a cycle that continues. So we've gone from a whole lot of nothing to everything, all of the elements that we have in, the first part was a very, 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 very fast process. And then the rest of it takes a long time. Okay. Here's another graphic that I find helpful. We have our Big Bang. Eventually we start making atoms and molecules. They start clumping together to make stars. The stars go through what's called nuclear fusion, and they start using up all of their fuel. Okay. When they start using up their fuel, elements start combining together to make heavier and heavier ones. We start fusing them together, okay? We start getting things like carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. Then those start combining to make even bigger elements. Eventually the star dies, it runs out of fuel, it explodes, and it sends all these heavy elements into the universe, and then they can start making new stars as well. So here we can see, the star has lots of layers. On the outside, we have hydrogen. The hydrogen starts fusing together to make helium. The helium starts fusing together, and you start getting more and more and more heavier and heavier elements until you get to the core. Once it runs out of fuel, it implodes, and it just spews out all those elements into the universe. And that's where we start getting these, what they call nebulas. These really pretty pictures are just clouds of particles that are floating through the universe. So now we start asking, well, how do we know which stars have which elements? Because we're clearly not, at a star. We can't sample it and see what it has. So what we can do is we can analyze the wavelengths of light that are coming out of that star. So we can either measure the wavelengths that are absorbed by the gases that are there, or we can measure which wavelengths are being released. There's kind of two ways to do this. So first, let's look at absorption. If you give an atom energy, the electrons are pushed up to an excited state, is what we call it, to a higher energy level. Depending on the amount of energy, it may go up 1 level, may go up 3 levels. It just depends on how much energy you've given it. So we start in what we call the ground state. That's where the electron would like to be, the lowest place for it to be. And it gets boosted up to an excited state. But the electron is not stable up there. Remember that we want to be at the lowest potential spot. So this electron is going to eventually come back down where it would like to be. And in that process, the energy needs to be released. And if we're lucky, the energy is released at a certain wavelength that our eyes can detect. And if it is, then we'll see light coming out. So you can draw this kind of this way. Sometimes you'll just see people draw lines like energy level 1 and 2. The squiggly line is telling you that energy is coming out. It's not always going to be light. It depends on the wavelength that it's in. So just showing you, we can draw, absorption going up and emission coming down. You could draw it like a little Bohr model with the electron going up and down. But the key here is that you're showing where the electron started, you're showing where it goes, you're showing that energy is either coming in or coming out. In our lab that we're going to do, it's called a flame test lab, we'll be using a Bunsen burner to put heat energy in, and we'll see colorful light come out. It's okay if the forms of energy are different, right? We're putting heat in, we're getting light out, but it's still energy. It's just in a different format or maybe in different wavelengths, things like that. It's not a big deal. One thing that's really important to understand is if you don't use enough energy, you will not be able to get up to the higher orbital, so no light will come out, okay? So it's really important that you understand that not all energy levels, orbitals, are the same distance apart. Some may be very close together, some may be very far apart. You may need just a little bit of energy, you may need a lot of energy. It's very unique based on the elements. Each element is going to have a slightly different setup in terms of where its energy levels are and its orbitals are. And so the amount of energy that it takes to push an electron to a higher level will be different based on which element you're talking about. So here is, the energy spectrum. Okay, we got gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet. The visible range is just this teeny tiny section right here, not a very big range. Okay, all the way up to radio waves, which are very, very big. Okay. Up here, these big, slow waves don't have nearly as much energy as these really energetic gamma rays do. Gamma rays are very dangerous. Okay, that's like if a nuclear bomb goes off, right? That's radiation that's going to hurt you. Okay. If you look at this, it's only this tiny window that we can see. Sometimes energy will be given off, but if it's not in this tiny little window, we may not be able to see it with our eyes. Now, there may be equipment that can detect it for us, right? But we may not be able to see it visually. Don't totally freak out looking at this diagram. I know it seems really complicated. But what I want you to focus on here is that each of these lines are showing you electrons that are moving between different energy levels. So, for example, if you have an electron that moves from energy level 5 and it drops back down to energy level 4, that transition is called part of a bracket series. These are all transitions that can happen based on the element you have and how much energy you're giving it. But the series of emissions that we can see are in this Balmer series, okay? So I like showing you this graph because it shows you that we can be doing lots of different emissions. Our electron can be dropping from lots of different levels, starting and stopping at different places. But the ones that we can see are just this one small set called the Balmer series, okay? In college chemistry, you would learn a lot more about this. You could do the actual calculations to see how much energy was released under each type of transition. We're not going to worry about that. As long as you understand that we can only see some of these emissions because only some of them are going to be in the right wavelength of visible light, that's enough. So speaking of the visible light, one thing we do ask you to know is you should be able to rank the colors of visible light from low energy to high energy. And the nice thing is it's the order of the rainbow, isn't it? Red is the lowest energy, then orange, then yellow, then green, then blue, then purple. Purple has more energy than red. So if I put some chemicals into a flame and out comes a red light, I know that it was a small gap that electron was moving between. If out comes a purple flame, I know that it was a really big leap that electron took and it fell a really long way. It was a bigger gap between energy levels, between those orbitals. Okay, so we should know this red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple range. The thing that's really interesting is that these are going to function like a unique fingerprint for an element. Each atom is going to have a very specific range of wavelengths that are, absorbed and then released, and we can use it to identify the element. The more electrons present, the more complicated the element, the more lines you start to see. You can compare what hydrogen's spectrum looks like compared to iron. Iron has all those d electrons and they start doing funky things. There's way more electrons present in general. So hydrogen only has its poor one little electron and it can go up and down in a couple of ways, but you can see there's not very many compared to iron, which is way more complicated. Here's just a couple extra examples. We have hydrogen that can do a couple of these emissions. Helium has 2 electrons, so it has a little bit more. Sometimes people will say, why don't these line up? Well, helium has an extra proton, doesn't it? So the gaps between energy levels won't be the same if we have a different number of protons pulling on those electrons. So you have to take into account not just the number of electrons, but also the number of protons, the types of orbitals, all of that is going to come into play. Okay? So in our lab, what we can do is use these unique emission spectra to be able to identify which element we're looking at. Things are going to turn different colors when you put them into a Bunsen burner flame, and you can use the color of that to decide which element you must have been looking at. One thing that's important to know is that the color we're seeing is a result of the metal atom. The metal atom, the cation, is the one that has the orbitals in the right range for us to be able to see. So it doesn't matter if this was lithium chloride, or lithium bromide, or lithium fluoride, or lithium sulfate. It doesn't matter. As long as it's lithium, you're going to see the same color come out. One thing that's kind of neat is that this is what's responsible for our fireworks being different colors. They use different chemicals inside the fireworks so that when they catch on fire up in the air, the atoms are going to absorb the energy and go to a higher excited state. They fall back down and they emit their colored light. And based on which element, you end up with different colors. So let's look a little bit at the difference between emission spectra and absorption spectra, because we're going to use one for our flame lab and we're going to use one when we are looking at the stars. So emission is what we see when something hot, a hot gas, is releasing its energy out towards us. So this is us spraying chemicals into a flame, and then we use a little prism to split the color into its different wavelengths for us, and then we get our pretty little lines. So this is what we're doing in the lab. The problem is this doesn't really work in the stars because there's cold gas on the outside of the star. The star is burning, it's releasing energy, but the cold outside atmosphere of the star absorbs some of that energy and then we can't see it anymore. So we can figure out what's in this outside cold gas by looking at which wavelengths get absorbed by the gas. So it's almost the opposite. This one is measuring directly what's being emitted. This one is measuring what gets absorbed, so we're kind of working backwards. The thing is, even if we're looking at absorption lines, they are still a unique fingerprint. Hydrogen is still going to absorb energy within certain wavelengths, and so some things will be missing in certain places. So if I look at this spectra here, I can see that we have a couple of lines that tell me hydrogen must have been present in that star because it absorbed and is not there anymore. Same with helium. We have some unique fingerprint markings that are going to tell us that that star must have also had helium in it. Let's look at these two examples. Okay, these are two stars. This one on top is a much older star. If you can see, you see lots and lots and lots of black lines here. Okay, that means there's lots of types of elements present. The more types of elements present, it means it's further along in its life cycle because it's had more and more time to fuse elements together to make bigger and bigger and heavier ones. So this star is very, very old compared to this one. There's not very many lines here. There's a couple, but it tells us that this is a much younger star. So that about sums it up. Okay, the big deal here, the part that's the actual chemistry part that we need to know. Let me kind of scroll to the slide. Where do I want? This one. Okay. Understanding that absorption is energy being absorbed, pushing the electron to a higher state. Emission is when it falls back down and releases the energy. If we're lucky, it will be in the correct wavelength for us to see it. If you don't have enough energy, you can't jump to the next level, so you're not going to see light released. We can only see a tiny little window of visible light. A lot of it's not going to be visible. That the spectra that get made are very unique. Okay, our emission lines will happen at unique places that can tell us which atoms we have. And then we'll use that in our flame lab to help us identify these metal cations to figure out what's present in our chemicals. Okay? All right, I hope that was helpful. Bye, everybody.